This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Oral questions, questions orales. The Honourable Member from Wellington Halton Hill.
The CSIS assessments released yesterday make it clear the PRC is and was actively recruiting top Canadian scientists to plunder Canada's research and intellectual property. The assessments also make clear that the PRC wants to weaponize this civilian research for military purposes against us and our allies. Knowing what we know now, will the government halt all collaboration between the Winnipeg National Microbiology Laboratory and any entities and individuals in the People's Republic of China?
The Honourable Minister for Health.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that an attack on our national security by foreign nations, be it China or Russia, represents an attack on democracy and represents a direct attack on every member of this House. And that I share his outrage that China or any country would attempt to interfere in our process. The Public Health Agency, which is one of the most respected agencies in the world, hired 2 Canadian citizens who are eminent and well-known scientists in Canada who lied. It is the Public Health Agency that discovered that. It is the Public Health Agency that fired them, and that's why there's now an RCMP investigation about their actions.
The Honourable Member from Wellington Halton Hills.
The documents, Mr. Speaker, reveal a shocking disregard for Canada's national security. They reveal a government that is completely asleep at the switch on national security and the machinery of government. They reveal government employees collaborating with Beijing's government and with the biological weapons unit of the People's Liberation Army. Equally shocking are the health minister's comments. He said yesterday there was no evidence of actual breaches at the lab and no sensitive information actually left the country. The documents say otherwise. Does the minister stand by those comments?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the 2 Canadian scientists in question were well known for their work in virology and had spent their time working on health treatments for those that were suffering from viruses. They are collaboration. There is absolutely no evidence of the thing that the member opposite is suggesting, and I do not think that it is at all appropriate to suggest that they were involved with weaponization or things of this nature. They have all the documents, they can see all the information. We have waived all the normal considerations, not only of national security, Mr. Speaker, but of employee relationships that normally are kept confidential. It was our government that did that. That's why they have this information.
The Honourable Member from Cumberland Colchester.
Speaker, scientists working with Ebola at Canada's only Level 4 lab collaborated with the People's Republic of China Army Major General. Sadly, this story does not end there. Dr. Chu was able to gain access to the lab for students from China, and it gets worse. A scientist from the Academy of Military Medical Sciences, the research arm of the PLA, known to work on biology-enabled warfare. How did so many citizens from a hostile superpower gain access to Canada's top lab? Is it because the Prime Minister admires China's basic dictatorship?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Some will attempt in national security concerns to play partisan games. I think that's unfortunate. And let me just give an example. With respect to Ebola, the exchange of Ebola in 2019 was done in the context of trying to work with China and other countries on finding solutions to Ebola, which exists in so many different parts of the country. At that moment in time in 2019, the relationship with China was in a different place. The information that was shared was through legitimate channels. It has nothing to do with this issue. It was absolutely known and handled with complete control. I think it's very, very important to not mischaracterize national security for partisan interest.
I'd like to remind all members to ensure that they don't use language which would be unparliamentary directed at any of their colleagues. The Honourable Member from Cumberland Colchester.
Speaker, that minister's comments are reckless and untrue. Before March 31st, 2019, the PRC did not have a containment level 4 lab. How can I be so specific about the date? This is the date on which a scientist at Canada's top lab, the National Microbiology Lab, shipped dangerous pathogens, including Ebola virus, to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This scientist had a history of visiting and collaborating with the PLA since 2016. When did the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister know about the espionage and blatant violation of our sovereignty, and when did they decide to cover it up?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
the exact opposite of a cover-up occurred. It's actually this government that created the process that released these documents. So they actually refused to participate in this process. The second thing that I will say, Mr. Speaker, with respect to our national security interests, that it is essential when we're dealing with national security to recognize two things. That the party opposite is saying that they would support a partisan interference in the Public Health Agency of Canada, that if they were in government, they would see it as acceptable for political interference into that process. No, it's at an arm's length, and rightfully it is at an arm's length. They are the ones that identified these Canadian citizens, these eminent scientists, were lying, and they took action.
Honourable member from Burnaby South.
The Arrive Canada drama never stops. Remember we told the Liberals that they could ask public service to do the work that was required? They said, no, it's not possible. Well, it turns out that the Arrive Can contract was awarded to a D&D employee. A public servant actually did the work. Under the Liberals, public money going to private consultants tripled. Why are the Liberals trying to give the Conservatives a run for their money at how much money they can waste on private consulting?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
I actually want to thank the member for the question because I think it's an important one. Mr. Speaker, as soon as we were made aware that the CEO of Dalian was a D&D employee, we've taken immediate action to suspend all contracts with Dalian, and I can confirm for this House that all active contracts with Dalian have been suspended. I can also confirm to this House that the member in question has also been suspended. The matter will be thoroughly investigated. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Regina Capel.
Confused because it's not Conservatives making a link between these scientists and threats to national security. It's the government's own security agencies.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Confused because it's not Conservatives making a link between these scientists and threats to national security. It's the government's own security agencies themselves saying that these individuals, quote, were collaborating with foreign entities that present a threat to the security of Canada. We're talking about research with pathogens and deadly viruses, while at the same time these individuals were on the payroll of the People's Liberation Army for the communist regime in Beijing. Now, rather than inform Canadians and come clean at the outset, the government went into overdrive to cover it up. How could the Prime Minister be so callous and selfish that he would try to protect himself rather than the security of Canadians?
You're going to have the Honourable Minister for Innovation.
I'm very happy to answer to my colleague because Canada has shown leadership when it comes to national security, Mr. Speaker. That's something the Conservative will not want to highlight to Canadians. But let me refresh their memory because they tend to be selective when it comes to the facts. On the 16th of January, Mr. Speaker, we announced that we will ban funding for research in sensitive areas. There's 100 entities around the world, Mr. Speaker. We work with our Five Eyes allies. We work with research center in this country. We work with university, Mr. Speaker. Canadians know that we will always put national security first and defend the interest of Canada.
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
They want to give themselves a gold star that finally 3 years later, after fighting, kicking and screaming to keep these documents hidden, that now they've been released only because Conservatives demanded it. Let's remember the facts. They ignored and refused to comply with 4 parliamentary orders. They took the unprecedented step of taking the Speaker of the House of Commons to court to keep these documents hidden, and then they called a snap election hoping it would all go away.
8 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister. Canadians know he's not worth the cost of the crime or the corruption. And just yesterday we learned that in the Prime Minister's $60 million Arrive scam, one of the contractors who was paid millions is actually a bureaucrat for this NDP Liberal government. That's why common sense Conservatives passed a motion in this House demanding that this government produce all of the documents on this Prime Minister scandal. Will he stand in his place and commit to releasing every last page?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, 24 hours. 24 hours after we became aware that the CEO of Dalian was a D&D employee, we've taken action, Mr. Speaker. We have suspended all contracts with Dalian. We have suspended the employee, and we have launched an investigation on how this person became an employee at D&D in the first place.